everybody. My name is Kealy Spring. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California, also providing telehealth to residents of Colorado. And this is my podcast, Therapeutically Aligned, where I meet and chat with other clinicians about the work they do and why they do it and how they do it. Today with me, I have Mark. Mark and I are just meeting each other, so I'm excited to hear about his practice and what he does. Mark, would you mind introducing yourself to the audience, kind of the broad strokes of your practice? So, where are you located? Do you provide in person or telehealth? What are your niches or populations that you work with? Kind of the broad strokes.
Yeah, certainly. Happy to be on the show. I'm really excited to record this and get to know you a little bit better. My practice is called Men's Therapy Online, and we do men's therapy online.
Look at that.
That's the pitch. It's the simplest title, simplest pitch we have. We're currently licensed in 6 states, and we are awaiting the Interstate Compact, which I imagine you may have talked about in your show, to have our
Oh,
LPCs be able to practice. Oh, so there's some coming up that many states have opted in, Colorado being one of them, which is where we're based, to kind of have this reciprocity between licenses. So
mhm.
that's something that we're really excited about, that we can really open up our services and see people in most states, once that kind of hits.
Is that only for LPC?
It's only for LPC right now. Yeah, I know that there's a LCSW one that's in the works. I think that's the next one after they do LPC.
Yeah, I think PhD has another one too, like a similar reciprocity. MFT, which I am, is lagging behind.
Mhm.
Could you just explain to people that may not be familiar with like what reciprocity means in this kind of context that we're talking about it?
Yeah, sure. So what reciprocity means is basically other states acknowledging that the credentialing process in a sister state, right, or a companion state is legit. And I think this really got accelerated after COVID because many people moved and they didn't want to lose their provider. They went back home or they went to Hawaii or something, and telehealth really kicked off during COVID. So it's really great that some of the state legislators are starting to recognize that the world is changing and the field is evolving. And by making the licenses more flexible, still rigorous, right, but more flexible, moving towards more of a national type of credentialing rather than state by state, I think it gives both therapists and clients more freedom and more choice, which is always a good thing.
Yeah, it helps too with people that are in areas where there might be a therapy desert, where
Yeah.
there aren't any clinicians around to have some options. I will say that during I had a client move to New Zealand, and I reached out to because internationally practicing has actually been easier than practicing
Yeah.
within United States borders. And I remember I reached out, I finally got a hold of somebody in New Zealand, and they were like, "Why do you Americans keep asking these questions about like, of course you can see your client. Why wouldn't you be able to see your client?" And I had to explain this whole idea of like every state is different. Every state has a set of rules and regulations. And so it's not so much about where I am, it's about where the client is. So it makes it messy, but it's nice to hear that at least they're moving that way. Hopefully they'll get there with MFT. Do you have MFTs too in Colorado where you're located? Yeah.
We do. Yeah. 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 We do. I think in our state, it's more of like, it's a secondary license in a way, which is kind of a bummer. I think most people that practice in Colorado, at least, are LPCs and MFTs.
Uh-huh.
And similar, like I'm a licensed addictions counselor, and it's also considered like a secondary license,
Uh-huh.
where I'm like an LPC, licensed professional counselor and a licensed addictions counselor together. Because if I was just the addictions counselor, it's not as strong. There's like a bunch of weird limitations that just show up because it's not as valued as highly as the LPC or the LCSW, the social work degree.
Yeah, it's interesting. It varies by state.
Oh,
I will
politics. Yeah.
Yeah, it's politics, and I
Yeah.
would say for the MFT, for example, it's a misnomer. So I work with individuals and couples, for example, but it's a marriage and family therapist. So people assume that like couples, yes, but families that I'm seeing, you know, family dynamics. You are seeing family dynamics, but not in a family group setting, right?
Right.
Like, it's kind
Right.
of a weird name. I have always thought
Yeah. Yeah.
leads people astray. So I like the LPC better. We have LPCC here in California.
Yeah, which is also confusing. Yeah, because LPCC in Colorado is like the candidacy license. It's like the junior license before the full license.
Uh-huh.
So I'll just say, yeah, I hope that the Interstate Compact it standardizes some of the terminology and provides more clarity for potential clients because that's the goal in the end.
For sure, for sure. Okay, so let's talk about your journey to getting here. So why did you decide to go this path? What was kind of the reason or the rationale behind it?
Yeah, so I'm sure, like most guests on your show, it's from a personal story, right? I mean, a lot of us therapists benefited from therapy, and I'm, the same. Very, very long story short, I'll give you kind of the highlights. You can always dig in if there's something that stands out. But growing up, pretty safe childhood, fairly privileged. Both my parents were immigrants. They worked really, really hard and established a great foundation in this country. But because of that, didn't have a lot of emotional intelligence. They came from trauma. I'm from Jewish heritage. So, I have Holocaust survivors on one end and refugees on the other end. So a lot of trauma, unprocessed things. And when they had to move here, they had to just like really work hard, and to survive. So I grew up safe, financially secure, but with not a lot of guidance or positive emotional modeling. What that kind of manifested as a young kid was being really shy, really shut down, having a lot of self-hatred. I was also like a nerdy Jewish kid surrounded by like, farmers and future military individuals. So like I just didn't really fit in. When I went to college, I did what a lot of young men did, which is I tried to reinvent myself. And I reinvented myself into what a 17-year-old dude thinks is cool, which is sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So I started using drugs and drinking and partying really, really hard, pretty common story. I went way too hard, way too fast, and it culminated with an overdose, actually, my summer of my junior year. And that was kind of my rock bottom moment that inspired me to get into recovery, as well as to seek therapy through my school. I was fortunate enough that my school had a really, really robust counseling program where we get 12 sessions a semester, which is basically almost a whole semester in a way. And it refreshed every semester. So I was able to be kind of in consistent therapy for the last 2 years or so of my degree. And then I went on to study Buddhism because that was a big part of my recovery was mindfulness. I went and studied Buddhism at Naropa, which we were chatting about earlier, hippie Buddhist school, therapy school in Colorado, Boulder. And then it kind of went from there. I worked in substance abuse treatment centers. I worked in the jail in Boulder, Colorado, and then started private practice. And now Men's Therapy Online is my latest evolution, where it's more of a group practice type setting. We're here to work with more guys, have more impact, and really focus on community, which I'm happy to chat about more. But what I really found with my story and a lot of young men, it's like we have all these surface level problems, whether that be addiction, substances or porn or gaming, or relationships or self-esteem issues or anxiety. But a lot of it, as you dig down, it's like gender identity. I think it's really confusing to be a man right now. And just like everything in at least in our country, in America, it's super polarizing, where you have men that are going full like red pill, alpha, misogynistic, mean person, right? Or you have the other way where you have men that are really disowning their masculinity and kind of becoming this nice guy symptomology and kind of are pushovers, and it comes out in other ways. So what me and my company are trying to do are find like a healthy medium and find a way to educate men of any age, really, what it means to be a man and create positive role models for guys out there.
Love it. Love it. And how long have you been? It sounds like a bigger practice, yes, that you have.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a group practice. It's me and 7 other providers. I'm the owner and founder, and I've been doing MTO. I've been doing that for 3 years,
Okay.
but then I've been in practice since 2013. So I've been doing this for a while. Like I said, working in agency settings and then solo practitioner, and now kind of this group practice model.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And the whole group practices and focus on a men issues.
Yeah, so kind of our niche is, male providers working with male clients
Mhm.
because there's, for your listeners, right? I mean, men are certainly privileged in many ways, but in mental health, we are actually a pretty extreme minority,
Yeah.
both as clients and as providers.
Yeah.
So our market niche is that we're pairing men that want to work with men, and they're looking for, role models and guides and mentors, really,
Yeah.
around what it means to be a man, what it means to be a good man in the modern era.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you're looking for that sweet spot in between the pendulum swing that you were talking about, which
Yeah.
is kind of what we see. And I think those two extremes get highlighted so much in our society, right? So people don't have what does that actually mean in the middle here to be just a good man?
For sure. I mean, a lot of the younger guys, the Gen Zs and even some of the younger millennials, a lot of times what they say, they look at the older men and they're like, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be this like Donald Trump figure, right? Or Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg, and all these guys that our culture are kind of like putting on these pedestals. They're like, ew, gross. Like, I don't want to be that, so they try to swing to be anti that.
Yeah.
But then, like I said, in that case, they kind of disown their masculinity. And because we still have these things in us, right? Our sexuality, our aggression, our competitiveness, things that are kind of inherent, testosterone, right? Like biologically inherent to being a man, it comes out sideways, often in self-destructive behaviors.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Okay, well, so we're gonna kind of come back to the actual work, but before we do, what do you like about it? What do you like about the work that you do?
Oh, I saw that's deeply personal. I think I was always able to work on something that I benefited from. I like the idea of selling good medicine. Like doing something that has worked for me as far as a profession. It's really great to be able to spread that out to the world and to be, a role model and a provider of something that I benefited from has been phenomenal. So when I was in recovery, I was able to work in treatment centers, and that not only allowed me to have impact about something I was clearly passionate about, but it also strengthened my recovery. It held me accountable in a way that, if it wasn't my job, it wouldn't be as strong. And similarly, as I explored a lot of my own masculinity and did a lot of men's work, now being able to give that back and reinforce my own growth is great. I think this job, I was going to say, it's hard to be a job. It is a lifestyle, right? It is kind of like an all-consuming thing. I was never really a fan of like the clinical separation that I think a lot of the traditional educational programs teach, because people that, at least what I've seen when I've tried to do that and other people try to do that, it can cause burnout. It's really hard to draw a wall. So by embracing that it is truly a like all-encompassing life path, I think that has made it very fulfilling. It's made it hard at times, but it's definitely made it very fulfilling. So it's both deeply personal and professional at the same time.
Mhm. Yeah, I think too, at least for me, I'll speak for my own, is that sometimes I find that that line that you're kind of speaking of is I will bring people home with me in my mind in terms of like clinically, how do I help them, or like a difficult case that I
Mhm.
need consultation on, or things like that. But we are in this really weird intersection because I can't turn off what I know. Like I have learned all these
Yeah.
things about people and humans and what works and what doesn't, and and while I also don't want to be everybody's therapist, that I'm like, like my neighbors when I'm walking outside, it's like the last thing I want is them to be like, Keely, I'm feeling depressed today. I'd be like, oh, that would be exhausting. But that knowledge is so inherent to who we are and to who you become. And at least for me, I feel like I have to live authentically. Like I
Yeah.
have to just
Yeah.
be the person that I am. And if I'm not, then that's going to translate to my work. It's going to translate to my personal. And so it's one of those weird jobs where it is a business and it is more about like who you are as a person.
Yeah, because we are the product, right? I mean, it's really ultimately people sitting with us, and I'm sure people have talked about, right? The research shows that like the relationship is by far the most powerful thing. So like it's just being with us. So as long as we are clear and we are doing our own work and we are living lives in a way that's integral to our values, right? Like it's going to benefit someone that sits across from us in the therapy room.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think that's where you see when somebody comes to you and they're like, oh, I had a bad experience. Sometimes one of the pieces is like the therapist isn't doing their work, and that's coming through in the therapy room.
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay, so what are some of your favorite modalities with the population you work with? Are there certain things you kind of draw from more than others?
Mhm. Yeah. So I really did an intensive study. So I did a postgraduate study in psychoanalysis, modern psychoanalysis in New York City. I went to the Institute for Group Studies there, which was phenomenal. It was a 3-year program. And I enjoyed that immensely. And I feel like with men, it's really, really powerful for a couple of reasons. And I also do psychodynamic, which I guess is also powerful in some way. So they're kind of very intertwined, I think, in the modern world. But analysis is helpful because, and for your listeners, it basically is highlighting your unconscious, highlighting the parts of you that you're not in control of. And for a lot of men, that in and of itself is scary because we really love to be in control of shit. So if you can tell a guy, hey, there's some stuff that you're not in control. In fact, most stuff you're not in control of. And a lot of men actually kind of relate with that because when they come to therapy, it's because they had a moment of being out of control often. Whether that's a substance use incident, right? They were on a bender, whether it's an anger incident or domestic violence incident, whether it's acting out sexually, usually what starts them in treatment, which is very different from women. I see women in general tend to come very proactively, which is great. You know, they feel like something is off and then they deal with it and their lives go back. But a lot of men were not very proactive. Like the bad thing has to happen. So when most people call me and my company, they're at that rock bottom because they lost control. Most men say that. So the psychoanalytic frame being like, hey, it's not you, right? You're not a bad person. You're not a villain here. You're not a bad dad or bad husband or whatever, right? But there's something in you, like trauma, you know, or conditioning or something that acted out, some unmet need that finally controlled you, right? That became more powerful. And we see this a lot with those nice guys I was talking about. The guy that is a people pleaser that on the surface looks very, put together, very charismatic, you know, but has often a dark underbelly, and usually some addiction or acting out or something. You
Mhm.
know, the most extreme example that I bring up of a nice guy is like a school shooter. You know, somewhere people are like, oh yeah, he was happy, or he was a quiet kid, you never saw it coming. And then there's like this kind of really dark underbelly. I think a lot of guys have that, not to that extreme, but they have a version of that. So yeah, I'll pause there about talking about analytic. I can talk about psychodynamic as well, but I'm curious your thoughts on that modality.
No, I'm glad you're bringing this up because this would have been some follow-up questions for me. So why don't we just talk about, psychodynamic a bit too?
Yeah, so what psychodynamic is, again, it's kind of it's a more classic way, I guess, or old school way of working, but it's really leveraging the relationship between the therapist and the client in work. So what that means is I'm a mirror for my clients. So I'm telling my clients how they're impacting me, you're right, what feelings, what thoughts, what memories it brings up in me, what impressions I have about them, and how they might be coming across, you
Yeah.
know. This is so critical for men, especially for white men, which is, you know, being Colorado, that's mostly what I work with. You know, we do, of course, open to diversity, but most of our guys are white men. And being like a white dude, you don't get a lot of or you don't get a lot of honest feedback. You get a lot of positive feedback, you don't get a lot of honest feedback.
Hmm.
So you have these guys, and as you're listening, you might be like, I have some guys in my life like this that like are assholes, but
Yes.
no one has actually told them that, you
Yes.
know. And we're seeing it from the other side where you have a guy who's confused, truly confused about why his relationships are failing, why his kids don't want to talk to him, why, you know, people are afraid of him at work and are not being honest, right? It's
Yeah.
like, oh, because you're kind of a dick.
Yeah.
But nobody has told him that
Yes.
because they're intimidated, right? There's a privilege thing, there's a power thing,
Yes.
there's, you know, there's this kind of intimidation thing that I think a lot of men, we intimidate those around us as means of control. So being another man, I can tell that guy from a place of compassion and honesty and truth and truly wanting that person to grow, the thing that everyone is thinking, but
Yeah.
no one's ever heard.
Yeah.
You know? And
Yeah.
I think for men, that's really critical because we don't have that honest mirror. So we end up confused and alone and hurt. And of course, it just makes those behaviors way worse, you know?
Yes. Yes. This resonates on so many levels. I'm in the Bay Area, so there's a lot of founders, and it's a lot of men of different colors, not just white men. But I will say that I get a lot of pushback as a woman when I try to confront some of this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I hear what you're saying because I sometimes I'm thinking like you need to talk to a man then because the thing I'm telling you is, because I'll get a lot of like, well, I'm going to push back on you, Keely. I don't think that that's that, and I'm like, yeah, but you're being a jerk. You're being a jerk.
Yeah.
People are experiencing you as a jerk. I'm experiencing you as a jerk. And I'm trying to give you that feedback, but because I'm a woman and who I am, it's just not landing in the same way. So I definitely resonate and hear what you're saying is like, I can see how that would be so powerful just to kind of really see somebody and kind of break through all the bullshit to say, yeah, this is what I'm seeing. This is what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's unfortunate, but I do think a lot of men in that in that typology, you know, called maybe narcissistic traits, right? I think a lot of us tend to be on that spectrum somewhere, right? Because of our culture. We're a very narcissistic culture. It's not our fault, right? But because of that, there's like a misogyny built in,
Yes.
you know. And I think it is far easier for men, again, it's horrible, but I just think it's true, to challenge a woman or push back, like you said,
Yeah.
versus another man. We tend to disrespect the opinions of other men, especially if we have that fragile ego or there's some trauma or there's our unconscious there that is constantly defending against it.
Yeah.
And I think most men are more afraid of being scorned by a woman or being criticized by a woman than by a man,
Yeah.
because most men, even the dickish dick you can think of, probably had his heart broken by a woman at some point, you know. And there's often an unhealed wound, whether it's a breakup or his mother or a family member, you know. So you can hit that wound so easily, and if there's no healing around that wound, you're going to get the defense mechanism
Yes.
rather than him actually being able to take that in, you know.
Yeah, 100%. I've actually even seen this with fellow clinicians who are male.
Yeah.
Like one clinician comes to mind where he told me that he thinks female clinicians have a hobby, whereas male clinicians have a career.
Yeah, that's just
Like,
misogyny, right? I mean, that just like
what?
that sucks. That
Like,
sucks. Yeah.
surprise, I'm a woman, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
that sucks. That
but,
sucks
but it was
bad.
right over his head. I thought, okay, all right, it's everywhere,
Yeah, it's everywhere, and a good example that I use to just kind of hammer home psychodynamic pieces from my own story that I want to share a little bit,
Sure,
because it's not always about being a dick. So I guess I want to make that point.
sure.
So for me, in my early recovery, I was in a group. I was actually in a psychodynamic group after I went through AA and all that kind of stuff. And in this group, I was talking about my horrible addiction stories, right? About like, being drunk, passed out, waking up in an alley, hooking up with random people, doing a bunch of risky behavior. And truly, from my perspective, I was trying to evoke compassion and care. I wanted people to feel sorry for me and be like, oh my God, that's so bad. Like, I'm so happy you survived. I'm so happy that you're here. Right. But as I was telling it, the group member, the group leader, who's phenomenal, he's a great mentor in my life, he was looking around the room and he was noticing that people were like backing away from me, right? Or like disconnecting or zoning out or like looking kind of uneasy. Because I was telling these stories in like pretty intense detail because I was just trauma dumping, right? I didn't have control really of how I was sharing the story. I was just like letting it out.
Mhm.
And what he pointed to, one of the women, it was a mixed gender group, one of the women in the room who I was trying to make a connection with and trying to have evoke this sense of care, and she was like very disconnected. And his intervention, which was basically like, hey, how are you feeling? She was like, I feel really disgusted and turned off and pushed away. And that moment was so powerful for me. That's what really opened my eyes to this type of work because I was like, wow. I really felt like this would work to like bring people closer to me.
Yeah,
And I was so clear that I was trying to get something out of the room. I was trying to get love or care or tenderness.
yeah,
And what I was getting was the complete opposite.
yeah.
And I share that example because I think a lot of men, focus on men, but I think a lot of people are in that where where we really are trying to get something wholesome, but we get the exact opposite. And the brain, being that it's kind of dumb in some ways, we just try the same thing but harder. We don't try a new strategy. We just double down, and then it repeats itself, and then we end up kind of isolated and pissed off.
Yeah.
So that intervention really opened my eyes to this way of working with people.
Yeah, love it. Love it. I love that example. I think what you're saying too, it's like it gets reinforced in these moments and then
Yeah.
people double down on it and then it becomes more like something that you own rather than something that's like passing or, like I had a feeling or a thought and, I want to examine that and explore that. It becomes like that's who I am and it's harder to kind of untangle that when it's, you start to kind of hold on to that as your kind of defense posture.
Right, exactly. I mean, I know a lot of people in recovery, and I could have gone down this path. It wasn't for, Jeff, my my mentor and group leader. I could have made meaning out of that moment and said, like, I'm just too intense for other people, and other people can't handle me, and I don't need to change. I need to find people that can really get me. Versus like what Jeff encouraged me to do was like, hey, dude, just like cool it a little bit. Be more clear about what you're asking for, and maybe try to tell those stories in a different way, and you might be surprised by the response that you get.
Mhm.
And that was really eye-opening to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you follow up and subsequently tell different stories that got you different reactions?
Yeah, we did a whole experiential thing over the next like 6 months where, I would tell a story and then Jeff had this term he said, be a barometer. So we'd ask like specifically the women in the room, because I was starting with dating, because I was trauma dumping all the women I was trying to date, but specifically the women in the room, like, how do you feel about Mark right now? Like, are we good, right? Or is he getting too crazy with you, right? Or does he need to reel it in? So getting that clear feedback was really helpful for
Yeah.
me. Because again, I would never have the opportunity to get that in any other setting.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it sounds like you did it in a safe environment because I could imagine that being flooding for some. I mean, you were able to like kind of take it in and
Yeah.
incorporate that feedback, but I could imagine some people might feel like, oh no, that's too much.
Yeah. I mean, I was like a young man and again, I was trying to be like tough as shit. So I was like, tell me anything, give me the truth. I want it, like give me it as crazy as possible, and I was very into recovery, into therapy in my early 20s. So I did enjoy that.
Nice. Okay, so next question here, kind of around this clinical work is, do you have a typical kind of session? Like, what is kind of the process if somebody comes into your group practice? Is it linear, or I would imagine with the work you do, it's a little bit, more organic, but
Yeah, so we do have a pathway, and it's a little bit different than a typical therapist because we are a group practice and we're community focused. So basically, what we do, which is pretty unique in the field, is we have an online community. So we manage it through Slack. It's all HIPAA encrypted, and we have a BAA with them, so it's all super private. People can use a pseudonym, or they can even just use like a string of numbers if they want, right, for their name, so they can completely disguise themselves to be anonymous if they want to. But every single person in our practice and alumni and people, even if they're not a current client, after they've been vetted, can join that. We're up to about like 350 guys. So we
wow.
have a community of dudes that are talking about real stuff in a confidential private space that's moderated by me and my team.
Oh.
So we start them in community. That's online. It's totally free, right? And,
Mhm.
and for a lot of men, they don't have that, right? They don't have any friends. They don't have any place where they can connect, or where they are connecting is toxic places like certain subreddits, right, or 4chan, or Instagram, right? They're going down these rabbit holes. So we're trying to create a different entry point for guys that are already searching for answers online. So we have that, right? Then we have them do individual therapy, right? That tends to be the next entry point for people. And also, we do a little bit differently is we kind of limit it. So we limit it to about 6 months to 2 years. Of course, if someone wants to go longer and there's a good case,
Mhm.
they go longer. But what I found for the average therapy user, especially we're private pay, so there's a level of functioning that's kind of assumed with some of our clients. But for the average person, that they tend to get diminishing returns. I've found after that. Once they've figured out their past, they've healed some of their trauma, they have a story about themselves. They've done all that what I call autobiographical work. That takes about 2 years, maybe three, depending on the frequency.
Mhm.
But then we go to what is really our main offering, which is men's groups. So the idea is, okay, after you've worked individually with your therapist, then you go to a men's group. We keep them small. There's 6 members plus a facilitator, which is on the smaller side. I've seen some therapists go up to 10, even 15. When I was working in the jail, it was like 25. It was more like a class, right? But we keep them small. So you really get to like know these guys.
Mhm.
And it's great because now that you've done all that past work, you kind of know your trauma. You're not having those big breakthrough moments. Those are best done individually. But then when you're in a group, it's focused more on action, which I think for men, we burn out on therapy because we feel like it's a lot of like insight or navel gazing, and we're like, okay, what do I want to do about it? And
Mhm.
when you're with a group with other guys that have that level of EQ because they've all been through individual therapy, they're all committed to growth. Not only are they, holding each other accountable to make those changes, right? To have that conversation with their partner, to show up for their kids in a different way, to stop using porn, whatever it is, they're also challenging each other. Because we have this culture, like I said before, of that mirror where we can call each other out. And if you think getting called out by a male therapist is one thing, getting called out by a group member is even more, right?
Fair.
Because me, I'm still getting paid. It's still like a little artificial for me to be there. I have some safety gloves on, right? Like I'm still in a role. But like in the group, it's just another dude like you
Mhm.
know? And all he wants to do is to have everyone get better and just to kind of elevate the community. So it's a lot more believable. And we think, the way I look at it, it's getting closer and closer to real life. Like the online community, not real life at all, right? But very safe, very controlled, very moderated. Individual therapy, a little bit closer, but still not really real life, right? It's still very contained. It's a treatment model. Group, a little bit closer because now you're in there with other people. It's a little more chaotic. It's a little more wild. It's a little more, flexible. And then hopefully, once you're in group, then you can bring all this stuff into your real life, which
Mhm.
is which is really all is what it's about, right? Bringing it to your families, into communities, into your workplaces, and bringing it out of the therapy room and into the world.
Uh-huh. I absolutely love this model. Do you work with people, like, can people join the group that haven't worked with you in your course?
They have to have done individual therapy
Mhm.
before, so it doesn't have to be with us,
Uh-huh.
but it has to be with somebody.
Mhm.
And we will, of course, sign a ROI, listeners release information, right? So we'll collaborate with the therapist. We'll get all the backstory, all the background, and then they can join the group. We really want to keep the groups as like the pinnacle offering. And again, I think if people are new and they're having these big insights about their childhood trauma or
Yeah.
about how they are, who they are, group is actually not a good container for that because you just don't have enough attention and safety
Yeah.
for that. So we want to make sure that someone has gone through that process before they're ready to join the group.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. I definitely have somebody in mind. I feel like this would be a really good fit for this.
Check us out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'll check you out afterwards. Okay, so next question here in the clinical area is, are there things that still surprise you about the work that you do?
I think what surprises me, and maybe it's because now I'm like getting old. I'm not that old, but I think like the younger generation is very surprising for me, and I am trying to really make an effort to hire newer grads and people that are of Gen Z and at soon Gen Alpha,
Yeah,
because as men they're really interesting where they are way more emotional even than my generation of millennials. I'm like an elder millennial, right? And we were the emotional soft ones. They're like 10x
yeah,
like what we are,
yeah,
you know? And they're so pro-social, they're so connected, they have so many of these deep friendships, or at least they say they do, but underneath it, they feel very alone and isolated and have like very little self-esteem. So they're kind of like a walking paradox I've seen,
yeah,
where they seem to have so much capacity and so much ability, but then when it comes to like actually executing, they really, really struggle.
yeah,
So that's pretty surprising for me because it's a more complicated case where I think like the older generations, again, broad strokes, but older generations are like all execution, no insight,
yeah,
right? Like millennials we were like all insight, right, and no execution, and then like Gen Z is like this weird mix of both.
yeah,
So they've been really interesting to work with, and especially being a gender-based practice, right, with all of the conversation around gender queering and non-binary and all that. Like it's something that of course I'm read up on, but I've also hired actually our first non-binary therapist to work with people that are working with gender in a new way. So
yeah,
we're trying to stay on top of the trends and the evolving landscape and evolving language of the new generation.
yeah, yeah. Well, I love that answer. That's interesting. Yeah. What about, do you wish there are things that people knew or understood about therapy or the work that you do?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned a little before about just hammer the point again. Men, please come proactively. You
Mm,
know,
mm,
please try to show up proactively because what I've seen of so many dudes is it's at that crisis moment,
yeah,
or it's because like, your partner told you have to go or they're going to divorce you,
yeah,
which is like its own kind of crisis moment. So it's like,
yeah,
the law's involved, or you're about to get fired, or you're going to lose your license. And like, we can help you. I mean, that's who we work with. So, check us out. But it's way easier if you had called us 2 years ago.
yes, yes,
And what I encourage guys to do is like, try to get some good male friends, which is very difficult, and especially in the modern era. But if you can find male friends that can just let that can be that barometer, it can be like, hey man, you seem a little off, you seem a little distant, it seems like you and your wife are fighting a lot. Like, go to therapy then, right? Go to therapy when the guys that you trust are concerned about you and are giving you good feedback before it becomes a horrible crisis, because it's a lot harder to dig yourself out of that hole.
yeah, yep, 100%. Okay, so final question here in this clinical area is there a tool that we could share with the audience that maybe is accessible or, people could use?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So two things. I mean, one, that Slack community, right? People can start right away, totally free.
Great.
Menstherapy.online. Join it, no charge, no commitment. If you're not ready for that, we have an online course on our website, which is called the Modern Man Playbook. And it's a series of emails. I think it's 8 emails. And it talks about our views on masculinity. And it walks you through how to, assess yourself, how to get outside resources. We have a lot of book recommendations there, TED Talks, things like that. And then we have a challenge in the real world to go and like try to express one of these values. So I would encourage you, whether you want to start to work on what it means to be a good man or just see what we think it is and see if you agree with us, because it's helpful that we're in alignment on some way, you can sign up for that. Again, that's also totally free. And that's on our website, which is menstherapy.online.
I will 100% share that too. So people will be seeing, as you were talking about it, some of that information in ways, and I'll definitely include in the description how to reach out for that. So thank you, Mark. I really appreciate those. That's great tools. Are you ready to be pivoted here to be seen more as a kind of human?
For sure. Yes. Yes. I'm ready to be a human.
Great. All right. So first question in my being seen questionnaire is, what is something that's making you happy these days?
Oh, so I'm a new dad.
Oh,
So
congratulations.
I'm a new dad to a daughter. She's 4 months old. She's a brand new baby. And what's making me happy is that she's just becoming interactive.
Yes.
So like, she would tell me and my wife no, right, by crying or screaming
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
whatever. But now she's starting to tell us yes with, some smiles, a little bit of giggling, some babbling. And like, I mean, I've heard from a lot of my friends it only goes up from here. But that is really, really magical just to like make that little girl smile and to like, be goofy with her and sing and do funny voices and read her books and just like see her light up when she sees me. I mean, she's already melting my heart and it's only going to be more melted from here.
I totally get that. My nephew, who's now in college, I remember one time my mom said he was around this 4 month mark or whatever when I first met him because I had been abroad. And at any rate, I remember she was watching me with him and she's like, "You keep making him laugh." And then she was like, "Oh, because you're just goofy with them." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, like I'm all facials." But that's when they start interacting and it's like, I love that period of time too. It's just it's such a joy to watch them like experience things and one of my favorite things is I'd put things on my head and then I'd have them fall off. And
Yeah.
it's like we could do that for hours.
Hours, yeah. It's like the simple humor, right? Like, yeah, just like making goofy faces or like, booping her on the nose and stuff.
Yeah,
Like she just loves it. Loves it.
yeah, love it, love it. That's great. Okay, so what's your favorite app?
Yeah, so a favorite app, that's an interesting one. I like right now Evernote, if you're familiar with that. It's just the note-taking app. So no, it's not like that fun, but ever since becoming a clinician, I dump everything into there where it becomes like my second brain.
Uh-huh.
And I found that it's cured my anxiety. Which
Ah,
again, as a therapist, it's not the only cure for anxiety, but it might be for a lot of people, and it was for me. It was just like getting organized and not holding so much stuff like in the RAM because I'm constantly like thinking and planning and strategizing. But if I can just dump all the data that I have into that,
mm-hmm.
um, it's wonderful, and it frees up my brain to be a lot more mindful, a lot more present, a lot more creative, more fun because I don't have to worry about like remembering stuff all the time. So
Yeah,
I'd say Evernote's my favorite app right now, and it has been for a while.
love it. I'm reading actually a new book called Drained, which is all about mental load. It's focusing mostly on
Yeah,
women and mothers in particular, but it's this concept that we hold on to so much mental load so I love this idea of like a notes app that
yeah,
just holds some of that for you. So you're not
yes.
holding it
You're not
all.
just freaking out all the time. Yeah, that's
Right.
great.
Just trying to remember it all. Okay, beach or mountains?
Oh, mountains. Yeah. I mean, I live on a mountain. I live at 8,500 feet. So I live at altitude. I have to drive a plow truck to plow my driveway. I've learned how to do chainsawing. From coming from like a nerdy Jewish roots to now trying to become a mountain man, at least cosplay is one. It's been great. It's made me a better person. And I find just so much like serenity up here in the mountains. We have nature everywhere. We have bears, we have foxes, we have mountain lions, we have deer and elk. It's just like I'm like living in a freaking National Geographic video. It's wonderful. I love it.
Love it. Love it. Okay, what is one thing that movies never get right?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think one thing that the movies never get right is like, how do I say this? Like I think like hesitation. And maybe most movies I watch are like male coded. It's like superhero movies and like, action movies. But like you never see the person hesitate or flinch. They're like just always kind of like moving forward.
Yeah.
And I think that makes a lot of men be really insecure with themselves because they think everything should be like a linear like rocket ship forward. And I think I felt that way, where every journey should just be like only up, or like if there is a dip, it's like that hero's journey where like there's like a clear villain and there's like a nemesis, and then you like defeat the nemesis, and then you're like stronger than before. And it's not that. It's like a lot of confusion and like indecision, and like the story's like not really that clear until you get to the end. And even then, you're kind of like making it up. Like it's like a lot of just like bumble fucking around until you find success. So yeah, I think the linear nature of a lot of movies can be pretty confusing for a lot of guys.
hmm hmm Yeah, fair. Okay, what's the best way to relax for you?
Oh, for me, I love hot springs. I love a sauna. I love a spa. I'm all about that. Having like a contained spa day where I go somewhere beautiful, whether, at a nice hotel or out in nature, and then just like disconnect from everything, right? Like no phone, no talking, no nothing, and just like be in the zone. That is so recharging for me.
Nice. Are there good hot springs up by where you are?
Yes, yeah, yeah. There's really good. I'm right next to Idaho Springs, so there's actually
Oh,
hot springs like 20 minutes away from me. And a lot of the Colorado mountains have a ton of phenomenal hot springs.
yeah. Yeah, they do. Okay, what about a dream trip location? Anywhere you want to go?
Oh, I have a trip. I want to go to Japan. It's my bucket list trip. It's the one trip that I didn't do before I got married and had a kid. But I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. I have it planned out. It's a 3 week trip. 1 week is like nightlife in Tokyo, right? 1 week is doing the Kamano Kodo, which is like a hiking pilgrimage trail in southern Japan where you kind of stay at these temples and walk through bamboo forest, right? As like a
Awesome.
samurai. And then the third week is the monkey hot springs. So going up all the way to the north to the mountains and hanging out with those monkeys in the hot springs. I remember seeing that and being like, I gotta go. I gotta hang out with those monkeys, man. You know?
I love how like you have it like 3 weeks of like, and those are because I always feel like you never get a full understanding of a country or whatever, but 3 weeks sounds like a good, and you've got like three distinct spaces.
Yeah, trying to have like a real, yeah, real like diverse experience of the country, you know? Yeah.
Love it. Okay, what advice would you give your younger self?
Um, I think like don't give up. Because I think when I was younger, because I was comparing myself to a lot of older men, my dad being one of them, some of my professors, some of people on TV, all stuff, movies, books, like I think I gave up a lot. And I'm happy with where I'm at with my success. And of course we're still growing, but like I think I didn't try as hard as I could have, and I got discouraged pretty easily. It took doing a lot of therapy, and took a lot of falling on my face to like learn more of that resilience and grit. And,
Mhm.
and I wish I had just had a mentor that had stuck with me when I was younger.
Yep.
I did a lot of work to actively seek them out, but that was post grad school. I mean, that was when I was already like 25 to 28. If I had had someone like I had it at that time when I was like 16 or 14, I feel like I would be in a much wonderful place. If I had someone that would just like stick with me and again like kind of give that like masculine love, which is I'm in your corner, I'm your coach, right? I'm going to help you. I'm not going to abandon you. I'm going to kick your ass a little bit, but I'm also not going to let you slack off. So I think like that combination would have been really helpful for me. That someone that could meet me where I was at and help me really really fulfill my potential.
hmm hmm Yeah, love it. Okay, what is your favorite of the four seasons?
Oh, I like winter.
Okay.
I'm a winter baby. I mean, I was born in winter, and I like just like the serenity of winter. And where I'm at, we get like legitimately snowed in,
Uh,
because I live on top of a mountain. So like, if they don't plow that road, like I cannot get down. And those are some of my favorite days,
mhm,
where you're just like kind of hunkered down and cozy, and it's just snow falling outside. It's beautiful.
Probably pretty pristine. I'd imagine like looking out the you just see kind of like the snow capped everything and
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a lot of nature, right? It's not like we're not in a neighborhood or anything. So just seeing like all the snow-covered trees and everything is just stunning.
yeah, sounds beautiful. Okay, this one's a bit of a thinker, but what would be the worst superhero power to have?
Oh, the worst. Um, there's a lot. There's a lot. I mean, I'm a big superhero fan, so there's some that are coming from like kind of indie comics, and one that just immediately came to mind is there's a superhero that he can go invisible, but only his skin goes invisible.
Oh,
So when he turns invisible, you just organs, right? He just like organs and blood and stuff, and
that sounds
it's very
terrifying.
obvious. It doesn't let you really be invisible, and it
Yeah,
grosses everybody out.
yeah. I guess the doctors wouldn't be able to be like, "Oh, you're having a problem with your kidney."
Yeah, yeah, I guess there is that. Yeah, they could see what's going on, but yeah, he's like, you don't go fully invisible, just surface level, you
Oh,
know?
yeah, that sounds awful. Okay, what is an animal that resonates for you?
I have always liked the rhino
Oh,
because the rhino looks like a murder machine, right? Like it looks like a tank, it has a big horn, but they're the most gentle, playful creatures out there. If
oh,
you see how they walk, they
really?
like prance, they like skip,
Yeah.
which is like very cute. And
Yeah.
they're herbivores, right? They're not like hunters.
Uh-huh.
But like if you mess with them, they can defend themselves. So
Right.
I've always really liked the idea of a rhino, which is like, have the power, but you don't need to use it all the time, right? You don't need to be a predator, but you can still be strong.
Oh, I love that answer. And nobody has said anything like a rhino before. That's great. Love it. All right, so this is the final question, Mark. When you look back at your life, what do you hope you'll be able to say about it?
That I left everything on the table, you know? I kind of maybe goes back to that wanting to not give up, right? But like when I finally end, I want to know that I gave it my all because who knows what comes after, you know? But I don't want to have it's not no regrets, right? But being like, I fully realized my potential or I never like held myself back, maybe is a better way of saying it, right? Like I never, there wasn't a risk, you know, of course, educated risk or calculated risk I didn't take. There wasn't as many moments where fear won. You know, like I'm kind of, and I think a lot of men maybe can relate to this. You're in a constant battle against fear, against cowardice. And at the end of the day, I want to know that like by and large, right, like I beat cowardice, right? I wasn't a coward in my life, that I gave life everything I had to offer.
Mhm. Love it. Love it. Well, thank you, Mark. You're officially seen.
Awesome.
I will include your information, some of the stuff we talked about. I'll include your website and all that kind of stuff. That said, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you'd like the audience to be aware of about your practice or, any of the kind of offerings that you have that didn't come up in our conversation?
I mean, nothing really. I mean, they can just check out the website, right? menstherapy.online. Even if you're, I guess, if you are a therapist and you want to attract men, right? If you're a clinician, check out that website because we use like heavy metal branding, Dungeons and Dragons, Hero's Journey, mythological stuff. Like we're very different than a typical therapy website. So if you're someone that wants to even work with men, right, check that out because it's a very unique design. So I think that's where just seeing what the vibe is, you know.
I love it. I love it. And you said you were licensed in 5 states right now. What are those 5 states? Just so people know.
Oh, I gotta see if I can rattle them off because it's based on our different clinicians. So it's Colorado, New York, California, Florida, Iowa, Oregon, and Utah.
Wow.
So
Okay.
seven. Yeah.
7. Wow. All right. Well, thanks again for your time, Mark. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. I really enjoyed coming on the show.